when you're checking to see if an argument is valid, you can just look at its form, of course, because that's what we've been showing with the truth tables. But I want to give you some valid arguments. Whenever you see an argument that looks like one of these, you know that it's valid. We've already done the truth tables. We know they work out. But here are just 4 examples of arguments that you should know right away once you've symbolized them that they are valid. The first valid argument type is direct reasoning, and that goes like this. If one of my premises is if P then Q, and I know that P is true, I can conclude Q. So if P then Q, P, therefore Q, that's a valid argument. Now it's worth noting or worth mentioning that just like in our other equivalent things, these don't have to be exactly the way they look. If I have if this then that, and I have this, I can conclude that no matter if this is not Q or this is P and not Q or something else. So as long as it has this form, if the first thing, then the second thing, the first thing, therefore the second thing, it's valid. Okay, that's a valid argument. So direct reasoning is one of our types of arguments that we always know is valid. Another argument form that we can tell is always valid is called contrapositive reasoning. Okay, in contrapositive reasoning, I start with an if-then statement. So if P, then Q. And then if I also have the premise not Q, I can conclude, well, contrapositive, reverse them, negate them. So I have not Q. Therefore, not P is a valid conclusion here. So if my argument looks like if P, then Q, and I have not Q as my other premise, then I can conclude not P. Okay, our next one here is disjunctive reasoning. Oops. Disjunctive reasoning. If I have P or Q, and I know that not P is true, or not P is one of my premises, then I can conclude that Q has to be true. Okay, so my OR guarantees that one or the other or both is true, so having not the first one tells me the second is true. Similarly, if I have P or Q, and not Q as a premise, I can conclude P. Okay, so disjunctive reasoning. This or that, not this, therefore that. My last valid argument type I want to talk about is called transitive reasoning. You might remember something about the transitive property of equality, or possibly not, but if you do, this is kind of like that. So I have a premise of if P then Q, a premise of if Q then R. From that, I can conclude if P then R. Okay, so if P then Q, if Q then R, I can conclude if P then R. I can also conclude, this is an alternate version of this, if not R then not P, because those two statements are equivalent. So I could conclude if not R, then not P as well. All 4 of these arguments are valid arguments, so if you symbolize your argument, you see one of these 4, you know this is valid. It's also worth noting that these aren't the only types of valid arguments. Okay, there are many, many, many different valid arguments. These are just 4 that I wanted to point out. If you see them, you know right away they are valid. But remember, you can check if any argument is valid using a truth table.